Okay. I think we're good.
I wouldn't go that far.
We cannot screw this one up.
Welcome to Book Club for Movies, everybody, for the week of March 1st. Oh, it's a firster. We're doing a firstie.
It's a firstie.
I'm Ryan Miller, and are you feeling better this week, Matt Amberg?
I feel great. I'm wearing pink socks that have puffins on them. Puffins the birds, not puffins like this. I think puffins
Mary
are the
Poppins song?
No. Well, maybe, but I think puffins are also the dollar store version of. Oh man, I want to say maybe Rice Krispies, but they might also be because it's a bird, and so it might be a bird to bird thing. It might be Fruit Loops. I can't remember.
On Book Club for Movies, where we watch one movie
Cereals for Book Club.
And talk about it here on this podcast thing, and you can too. Podcast at bookclubformovies.com. Tell us what you think. Facebook and Twitter too. I'm concerned that now your state of being is tied to whatever socks you're wearing on any given day.
Now?
Is that what I am to learn? You're right. I'm just now figuring this out.
Yeah, you're just this is like one of those things where it's like, we've been married for 20 years. Oh my gosh, I had no idea you had a giant wart on your nose.
You're gay?
Yeah, again? More?
So this week we're doing a movie that we shouldn't.
That's not true.
You're right. That should be done. I guess it's just up in the air as to whether or not we should do it. We should do it. Everybody should do it. Happy Black History Month.
A week late plus
a week. Yeah, late. Sorry. We almost would have recorded this. Probably wouldn't have come out, but we almost would have recorded this appropriately during February. But
instead we appropriated it.
Oh boy.
For March. No.
But you were sick. So
I was actually I was not feeling good last week. I don't know. Sunday I took the day off on Monday too. I was not.
How many COVIDs did you have?
Approximately 18.
Wow.
Not the 19th one, so it's not the bad one.
Oh, you got is COVID-18 just SARS? Isn't that, if I understand correctly, isn't that what it?
Well, SARS would have been COVID whenever SARS actually happened, which wasn't 18. Because it's COVID-19, it's the year it happened. The 19 is from the year they discovered.
Serious?
Yes.
I thought it was like
sequential
sequels in a movie. This is the 19th COVID,
and that's why it's not as good. No, my understanding is that it's based on the year.
Let's not look that up. Let's go straight into a synopsis of the movie we're doing this week, Judas and the Black Messiah.
Sure, we can do that. We've got one here at bookclubformovies.org. Nope, it's .com. That joke only works when I say other things that are not .anything.
.gov might have been the...
Yeah, now you're taking it.
Bookclubformovies.gov.
Yeah, Judas and the Black Messiah, coming at you 2 hours and 6 minutes. Written by Will Burson and Shaka King, directed by Shaka King, starring Daniel Kaluuya, Lakeith Stanfield, Jesse Plemons, Dominique Fishback, Ashton Sanders, Al G. Smith, Lil Rel Howery, Martin Sheen. Here is your Book Club for Movies synopsis for Judas and the Black Messiah. With jail in his future and J. Edgar Hoover on a warpath against the Black Panthers, William O'Neill is given an opportunity to help the FBI corner and eventually assassinate the 21-year-old chairman Fred Hampton. Repeat, 21 years old. Yeah. That may have been so. I'm just gonna jump right now.
Do it, jump.
I knew un poquito about this situation.
Yeah,
I knew names. Didn't know what had happened in the long run. I did not know about Fred Hampton more than the name himself. I could have told you. I knew he was involved in the Panther movement. Didn't know exactly where he landed. I don't know why I know his name. And I still to this day, I don't know why the name is something I know. I knew. It was it's one of those, it was in the ether and I heard it enough or somewhere to find out that he was only 21.
Crazy. Yeah.
Not only that he was murdered by the federal government.
Also very surprising. Yes, we should.
At age, that's not surprising. It's the federal government. They'll murder anybody. Not only the fact that the federal government murdered him at age 21, the fact that he was such a good orator, he he had a vision, he had a plan, he had understanding. He was able to, again, the talk to people, and not just orate, but actually converse with people on every level at that age is mind-blowing. Like, to have
It's
your
crazy.
ish that well put together at 21, and then to have it all just taken away from you for no reason, zero, like, again,
Or maybe for that reason, honestly.
I mean,
obviously a bad reason.
The
but
actual reasoning that the U.S. government is
Right.
there is none. There's no reasoning behind this.
Right.
They have a quote unquote reason, but unbelievable. Like, and after we watched the movie, I didn't dig a ton, because honestly, even for what the movie is, this is not as overly dramatic. It's not. It's got a pretty good clip to it. It runs 2 hours, but it almost has. And I really, really don't like saying this because it's not a great comparison, but it has almost an action movie feel to it at points, where, like, it's the action movie parts where the action isn't happening. You know what I mean? Like, in a good way. Like, that's not a bad thing. It's just the way the movie is filmed and all that. It's not like, it's not filmed like a melodrama. It's not filmed like a deep drama, even though the content, the discussion, everything about it definitely has real dramatic tension to it. You know?
Yeah, sure. On paper, it's that as opposed to an action movie for sure, but I can see maybe a kinetic nature to. That's a great. Probably the direction.
Yes.
Would be where that could come from. But yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
And I think
can get that.
I think it's actually an interesting choice here, because I'm curious to know if the way this was filmed and the way this was presented and edited, if that was done for a wider audience. Because I can see this story.
I'm sorry, was that wider or whiter?
You know, that's up to the viewer. But I can totally see how this movie could immediately be something that turns. I don't want to say turns people off, but becomes a, like, I don't know if I want to watch that. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I think honestly it should turn people off. Like, I think this shouldn't be something that you're like, oh, that was fun.
Right? You know, my gosh, what a delightful little film.
Neato.
Now, let's go watch Bob and Star go to Vista Del Mar. What a duo.
I've heard that's amazing, and we might do a show on
I
it.
have too. But as a follow up to this movie, maybe not like right away. You know what I mean? Like not on our show. I just mean in life. You don't necessarily like have that. We're gonna watch Judas and the Black Messiah and then Bob and Star. Sure. Oh my gosh!
Yes, that is a proper characterization, I believe, of people that might. Yeah, this movie isn't that, and I would hope wouldn't be, and I agree that isn't. And I think we'll have some issues talking about it in that way. I think we'll have some issues talking about it as a whiter audience here.
What?
You get a little more cred than I do, I feel like, just
because I'm a Jew.
Yes, the background that you get to be a person of
interest,
cultural color, whereas I am not in any way.
No, you are just like, hey, dude, let's go surfing.
I couldn't be whiter. So that, by the way. But still, I did enjoy it quite a bit, regardless of how hard it might have been to watch at some points. I mean, the movie hinges. We're going to spoil the movie, etc. Blah, blah, blah.
I mean, I kind of spoiled it in the synopsis.
Also, it's real life.
Whatever. Yeah. Real life spoiled this. Also, my synopsis.
The movie hinges on the murder of Fred Hampton, and should, because it is the hardest thing to watch, to listen to see, to feel, and could have been even worse, I would say, for the actual, like, what actually happened.
Yes.
And when you said you didn't read up much, what happened when we didn't do this show last week is I had a whole week to kind of do that.
And I'm really glad one of us did.
No, and I'm not throwing shade at
No,
you
I'm not kidding.
Okay.
I'm glad. I was actually banking on it because
Well, good.
I love me a good docu movie.
For sure, yeah.
I love a good, like we've talked about this with Spotlight. We talked about it. We both really enjoy them, especially when I mean, it was a stupid thing to say, especially when it's well made. Well, because the bad ones,
yeah, sure.
I like the bad ones, but I love the good ones.
I'm the guy that goes to the Assassin's Creed games for the history,
right?
Most of the time, right? Like, oh, this game is fun, but look at all of the stuff I'm learning.
Right? And you and I,
half of which is not true.
And that's funny because like we talked about this also on Zero Hit Points a long while back. That one of my favorite things about those games, especially the ones in Italy, was sitting down with my wife, who is very familiar with Italy, and going, "Oh, if you go this far and then take a right here, that building is going to be right there," and then not looking at the map and just following her her mental map and knowing. So we both really like movies of this nature that have a true story to them, and we both typically find out what actually happened because we absolutely know there is a 900% chance that at least 80% of what's on the screen didn't happen the way the movie is saying it did. It's not saying the incident didn't happen, but the way everything went down, maybe not.
Right. And doesn't have to. Like, we're not drawing that line. Like, this wasn't 100%. Like, but we want to incredibly fine with artistic license. And in fact, that can be a lot of the times where, that's where a movie like this can sing. Because it's something that can't be done in other avenues. Documentary is documentary. If they tried to do that in a documentary, with the exception of maybe some reenactments or something like that, then it's kind of a bad documentary in a way.
Right.
But with this type of thing, like I'm interested to see what they kind of put together or mash up or what they represent to kind of get at the spirit of the thing, because they can't, necessarily.
And I think I really appreciate that we both tend to do that, and I'm glad that you did do that, because this is one where I am legitimately curious how close this was to reality. Based on what I read, which was very, very little, the ending sounds like it was pretty close to reality. The rest of it is where I just have not nearly enough of an open of knowledge. I just don't have the knowledge there.
So I guess to say then, and this is what I almost started to tell you before the mics were on, but when I first watched it and then went through like what I could find of it, there was some pretty good stuff out there. Jacobin had some stuff. I've got a kind of for the masses thing on Screen Rant about 5 things it gets right about the true story and 5 things it doesn't. And then I also was able to find that episode that's referenced to kind of bookends the movie. It is an interview with Bill O'Neill, which is the second character in this film. I don't know if we've mentioned as much as Fred Hampton.
Lakeith Stanfield's character, who was an FBI informant inside the Black Panther chapter. He ended up being the security captain at one point, actually pretty quickly. So that's what I could find then. And then I tried to search for an article that I couldn't re-find as of last week, and couldn't find it this week because so much more has popped up in the last 7 days on this thing. I bet. And
I'm guessing that has something to do with what you told me minutes ago, that this won some awards at the Golden Globes, which I guess were last night.
Yeah, Daniel Kaluuya won Best Supporting Actor, the Golden Globe for that.
Which, hey, that's kind of instructive. We get down on awards shows, rightfully so, but this is kind of where you can see their value, is that a lot of sites will be like, hey, well, this is going to get traffic now then, and they'll do it,
Sure.
And Slate did something just 4 days ago and did some good work here with the actual fact versus fiction. So I'd say if you're going to look up any of that, check out the Slate article.
Yeah. If you can send that to me and or tweet it, that would be cool.
Will do. It also has several links to further videos. There's a documentary called The Murder of Fred Hampton that they say is pretty definitive. And so this movie has that. It has a little bit of everything we've said, and I do like the way it portrays the history, and I do think it is pretty accurate given the facts. They do put some things together.
Okay.
The crowns don't exist. They're kind of a combination of a couple different gangs that Fred Hampton went and tried to talk to ally with.
Was that supposed to be like the would that have been the heavily more heavily Puerto Rican kind of gangs? Because
that was part of what he ended up calling the Rainbow Coalition, which I don't remember if the Puerto Rican name of the gang in the movie was accurate, but he did go to. I don't even remember
them mentioning one in the movie. Like they mentioned the crowns, and then they don't even mention they mentioned that the white guy's name is the preacher who stands in front of the Confederate flag. They just call him Preacher.
That was true too. Fred
right.
did, although some of the occurrences about how he got them into the quote unquote Rainbow Coalition, I guess, differ. You know, we get some Hollywood rendition. No, I don't even want to say Hollywood. We get some cinematic renditions of him walking into a place, you know, very with bravado and, you know, putting not really putting his foot down, but orating as he did in a way that got them on his side, which didn't actually happen, but I think is a good representation of how it would have. Like he
Sure.
won them over eventually and was able to create this Rainbow Coalition with words in a lot of ways, you know, with charisma. So that's fine. That's all cool. And honestly, I didn't have any real huge problems. That's my thing. You know, I look up what actually happened after the fact and it ruins the movie for me.
No,
this movie wasn't ruined for me by looking any of this up.
That can definitely occur, I think. Like, because, you know, you read about the reality of it and then the Hollywoodization, the glamorization of a situation. I don't know that it sours the movie, and I think I'm choosing the word sour because I think it doesn't make the movie bad. It just it does make it a little more of a sour taste in my mouth to go. When it's so far off, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I don't think that's unwarranted. Like, to some extent, we're having issues with the decisions that the filmmakers have made. That's what we do.
And in some of those cases, I think we've talked about this, and I'm driving myself nuts right now thinking about what movie it was we had to talk about this.
Bohemian Rhapsody.
It might have been where we were like, why did they take this route when the truth
absolutely Bohemian
there's a truth that is easily filmable, it's easily done, and you've decided to completely for no reason.
The truth was more interesting, more innovative. Like the Bohemian Rhapsody did this thing where they followed every other band biopic movie where the lead goes out to do a solo thing and it breaks up the band. This is one of the most egregious examples from that movie. Whereas in real life, everybody had already done solo stuff. And, you know, it could have made for so much more of an interesting and different story.
Yeah.
You know, there's stuff like anyways.
Okay.
This treads that line perfectly.
Great.
In my eyes. Like, nothing I read after the fact ruined it for me.
I'll tell you, I think that the one thing that I did learn after the fact of watching the movie that did ruin this movie for me, because there was one thing.
Do tell.
That did kind of ruin this movie for me. It's the fact that it's true. Really, really, really ruins this movie for me. Like, it's hard to watch entertainment when it's true. And Beth and I had a pretty good conversation after we watched the movie about how a couple of things, how the movie was made, what it looked like in terms of taking the era, the late 60s, early 70s. And we both agreed that the costuming was actually pretty good. The makeup was really good for everybody.
Dude, Sheen as J. Edgar Hoover, like,
amazing. The makeup for that was
looked
great.
Disgusting.
It's gross.
It was great.
But the one
looked
thing,
like a disgusting man.
The one thing we both kind of were like, you know, it's something that I call out frequently. Is set design and stuff, and the movie itself doesn't really do anything crazy with that, which I actually didn't mind because the overall for this is not about, it's about the people. It's not about the objects in the background and whatnot, but the movie doesn't go out of its way to make it look like the 60s or the 70s. It's a very well shot film. It looks nice, but we had a pretty good discussion about how this movie and the situation, like, it hasn't changed. Nothing has changed. Like, you know, black people stand up, person of color stands up, they are shot down. Like that is so often reality still. And it's crazy that this has always been, and it just like where, how does it stop? How does it end? How do we end it? You know, like
it's unfortunately still a timely and important movie,
and
I feel like is part of the reason.
I am so glad the movie was made, and I'm so glad it came out when it did. You know, because we're at a real precipice in terms of the knowledge people have and how it's acted upon, and knowing what happened in the past. And we watch movies like this, and it's just like, how do we stop it from happening again? You know,
it wouldn't surprise you to learn that this movie still had to be shopped around for years before it got picked up.
And I know it was very difficult for a number of filmmakers have tried to get this movie made for a long time. Yeah.
Do you know who was shopping it around for the longest time? Like,
I don't remember.
Who wrote the thing?
I did remember reading a couple of different names, and I don't remember who they were anymore. I want to say
it was the Lucas brothers.
Is that who it was?
Yeah, Kenny and oh boy, you'll recognize them the second you see them.
Yeah, Kenny and Keith.
And yeah, they apparently shopped this around. Had trouble getting anybody to pick it up until they landed on the pitch that involved Bill O'Neill, Lakeith Stanfield's character, as kind of an in too deep protagonist. Which, if I had any complaints about the film, it might be that kind of storyline. It doesn't do necessarily anything with that, and probably shouldn't, because it's not the focus. You know, we just very recently talked about a film. Oh, what was it? Maybe it was Loving Vincent, where they also went with this weird kind of CSI plot for no reason, but maybe because since that is so well worn, they can spend their time in other areas. Something else you touched on that I think is part of that is that the movie begins. Maybe we should talk more about the movie itself. The movie begins with this beautiful introduction that is very 70s, very hip. You know, Lakeith Stanfield walking into town in a trench coat, impersonating an FBI agent in a trench coat and fedora. And it's to the music of, did you look this dude up?
I didn't. The music, the soundtrack to the movie, though, is outrageously good.
It's so good.
Totally, like, buyable.
And it's at the forefront, at the very beginning. It's a piece called The Inflated Tear by an artist that goes by Roland Kirk, later Rasan Kirk, when he that name came to him in a dream. And if that tells you anything about the dude, like, a movie could be made about just him. And when I first heard that song, because it sounds like two different instruments in kind of weird congruence, and I was like, oh, that's cool. After I watched the movie, I was like, oh, that's great. Like, I went back and watched this beginning because it was so striking. And I was like, oh, that's awesome, right? Because this is really about these two characters, you know, about Lakeith Stanfield's Bill O'Neill and...
the titular Judas, by the way.
Yes, and Daniel Kaluuya's Fred Hampton.
The Black Messiah.
And then when I went back and actually looked up this dude, Roland Kirk, it's actually 3 instruments that he is playing at once.
Well, of course. Why wouldn't he? One-man band.
And did that often, and I guess even modified instruments himself. He was playing a tenor saxophone, a stritch saxophone, which is an alto sax where the upturned bell has been taken out.
Okay, yeah,
so it's just straight, and the thing is huge. It's like as tall as he is when he's playing it. There's a live video on YouTube that you must look up of this guy in Prague, I think, playing this song even. And a modified... a manzello, which is a modified saxello soprano, which instead of being straight does have a bit of an upturn at the end. It's nuts. The dude is great. But the music and that whole introduction is so striking that Truthfully. I kind of wanted the entire movie to be that.
Right.
But I understand that that's kind of a different movie. Maybe that's just a Spike Lee movie at that point, you know.
Sure.
I don't think they wanted to do that necessarily, even if the storyline does end up being the In Too Deep thing, does being a little well worn. It's an obvious pull because they want the protagonist, who is typically the person you enter the story through, right? They want his issue to be one of conviction or investment, right? So now the viewer hopefully would take that also upon himself, you know, of conviction, of investment in this, in the cause, in the whatever, because Lakeith Stanfield plays him possibly more conflicted than the real life Bill O'Neill, it seems like.
Sure.
Which the other thing I was able to find was that it's bookended with that Bill O'Neill interview. I was able to find the episode of TV that interview was filmed for. I couldn't find the video of the entire interview, but I found a transcript of it at like the University of Washington or something like that. And it's pretty, it's great. It's nice. It's neat.
Oh, it's fun. What a fun story he had to tell.
What a fun thing we found. Because he, by the end, does say a lot of stuff like he doesn't regret it. He says like, am I a hero? No, I'm not a hero, but
you're definitely not a hero, dude.
No, yeah. I mean, the interview asked him that. So it's
no,
not
I
like
get it. No, I'm just saying it's a stupid question.
But yeah, but he does say stuff like that. He's like, no, I don't. He says he doesn't feel guilty then or now. Thinks he didn't betray anyone is another thing he says in that interview. He's not ashamed. But when he's questioned about that night, about Fred Hampton's death, because he does admit that at one point it hit him that he had something to do with that.
All of it. He had everything to do with it, but sure.
He has a hard time talking about it. Because throughout the transcript, they ask him to redo some things, right? Because they want it more concise or neat or with the proper article for camera. And he can't do it. He's like, no, I can't talk about that again. So it's an interesting interview, short still, in how conflicted he does truly seem, and I think does lend some credibility to Stanfield's performance, although doesn't necessarily need to, because I think Stanfield does a great job of, the camera moving in on him and him without any words having to portray the biggest conversation in the entire movie,
Sure.
And he does that.
Yeah, I think he does it great. We can see that the character of William O'Neill is conflicted throughout most of the movie. I would say, I would say, based on even what the film is telling you, I would say that my read on it is that William O'Neill is given a little bit more of a gloss in this film to look like a better guy than he probably was. And here's the thing. He says, I don't feel any guilt about this. As soon as that interview was over, he went and killed himself.
Okay.
So...
And to give that its full entire context, which, yes, the movie does end in a way that makes you think it was related and could very well have been related. But the movie, the way it has some post-credit stuff, and it says Eyes on the Prize 2, which is where that interview aired, premiered on PBS January 15th, 1990, Martin Luther King Day. Later that evening, William O'Neill committed suicide. And I believe he committed suicide by just walking into traffic, I think is how he did it. I didn't actually look that up. Or didn't dig into that as much beyond that. But while that series did premiere, the episode he was on didn't show up until a month later. And even the series didn't premiere until 9 that night, whereas he killed himself at 2:30 in the morning. So
yeah, but that's one of those things where I'm gonna say, and yeah, I mean, I have no right to say it, but the way I read that still is he knows it's coming. Like, it's not like especially then he had a TV guide. TV guides existed.
Sure. That's the best actually portrayal. Yes. That he sat down one night to read the TV guide, got to the little blurb about the episode when it was coming out 4 months later and said,
to traffic I go.
This is not a funny joke, but I'm not even denying that it didn't have something to do with it, right? Like after that interview, which was the only interview he gave on the subject his entire life, it sat with him after it.
It
for
had
sure.
to.
Like,
it had
absolutely.
To.
Yeah.
When that's the first thing you the only public interview you give after having sat on that stuff for 30 years. I like I said, I feel like the movie probably put a little bit of a gloss on him, a little bit of a sheen to make him out to be a better protagonist, quote unquote, or a better character for us to maybe at least not dislike.
Yeah,
knowing what he's going to do,
which you have to do, right? Like if he was an out and out, just like in it to win it FBI informant, like trying to get Fred Hampton killed,
right?
We would probably have, or at the very least, it would be an even less neat movie,
right?
In a way,
fun.
Not as fun. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like, obviously, and the movie does touch on some of that. In that interview, he talks about how he did come to see Roy Mitchell, Jesse Plemons' character, his FBI contact, as a father figure. Like he literally says that. He came to see himself as an employee of the FBI, like as an FBI agent. You know, he bought into it for sure. And he admits that readily on the show. And it sucks.
Yeah, no, I mean, there was very clearly some kind of a disconnect for him. And the disconnect was probably, that's how he disconnected from it, was, well, I'm an FBI agent, so I didn't do anything wrong. Which, I mean, that's Cop 101, right? Cop 101 is, we didn't do anything wrong. Even if you're on video proven that you did it wrong, that you're the murderer, that you killed the guy by putting your knee on his neck, I didn't do anything wrong. It's his fault. Like, dude, like, you made choices.
So he's a good cop, you're saying? He's an excellent police officer.
That's the only kind of cop there is.
Yes, he definitely compartmentalizes then and now, obviously. Right. And he gets into it a little bit. He calls himself apolitical, which at the time I buy, and I think the movie sells that as well.
Sure.
Like, he wasn't a guy that even thought about the civil rights movement.
Sure.
You know, he just tried to steal a car and had a joyride with it. And in real life, when he got caught, showed an FBI badge to the police officer to get out of it, which automatically makes, when you impersonate a federal officer, it becomes a federal crime. That's how he got the FBI involved himself.
Okay, because they mentioned that in the movie, but I'm like, how did, like, he could go into, you or I could go into any bar we want and tell anybody we're an FBI agent. I don't think that's illegal. It's only illegal when you finally tell the cops.
It depends on the level of impersonation. Like, impersonating an officer is definitely a crime. It's just, you know, like, if you just go into a bar and say that, you're right. It's probably, nobody's going to do anything or prosecute.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you walk up to some guys you're trying to rob and telling them you're an FBI. That's not, like, I feel like that's not.
That, I believe, crosses the line. That would be crossing the line, I think.
That's crazy.
Anyway, whatever. Okay,
I don't know. I don't think so. Otherwise, everybody's a cop.
I've got a way we can test this out.
I do too. Yeah, let's go. I've got a badge. Anyways.
Yeah, anyway, I don't remember what I was saying about. Daniel Kaluuya's performance is even better, let's say. And I guess that's where the award came from, sure.
Yes.
He is selling it. He's got the voice. It's beyond impersonation, like 1,000,000%. Give him all the awards.
Yeah,
sure.
he sounds like he got the voice down, man. He got the cadence down and everything. Like, it was all there.
And then I also want to say about Daniel Kaluuya's performance, because I think with especially biopics and or biopics, there's a temptation to portray the character as kind of always on, you know, like because obviously these movies are made about larger than life people. That's how it happens.
Right.
And you need to get that across. And again, with the whole trying to communicate the spirit of a thing, it's not surprising that you would be that person the entire time. I don't think Daniel Kaluuya makes the mistake that some of these do with kind of just always being on or always being that guy in every instance of his life, you know?
Sure.
Like, we don't have the video of him with Deborah Johnson in the bedroom talking about things. You know, those are largely, in fact, Deborah Johnson herself, who goes by a different name now, and I apologize to her.
That's right. She changed her name.
Akuya Najeri, yeah. Hasn't been public, even in her book, her memoir, about those private conversations. So,
well, good for her.
Yeah. No,
I mean, for real, like keep stuff private.
Yeah, no, yes. Good for privacy, I say.
I like privacy.
So those moments are largely interpreted, and I think interpreted super well by Kaluuya, and he does that throughout.
Yeah, I mean, I think he works in a character that is fully realized.
Yes, and not just that news clip persona.
It's not just always the public persona. No,
Yes.
he really, that this movie does. I mean, it does a pretty good job of giving us a well-rounded version of who was Fred Hampton, and he by all accounts seems like a pretty good dude. You know, like, can't really say much more about the guy other than that.
Seems like a pretty good dude. That's like 2 steps away from neat. He's fun.
He's like, there's Bob and Star and Fred Hampton. No, but I mean, he does, right? He seems like the kind of guy like how do you, I cannot for the life of me hear any of the things that he said and then reconcile. And I absolutely have zero qualms in believing that somebody, whether it was Hoover or not, referred to him as the quote unquote Black Messiah. like I absolutely, the FBI wanted him dead because he was a good person trying to do good things that go against the status quo, because it wasn't white enough. Like, you hear about all the things that he was trying to do, Fred Hampton was trying to do. In particular, the thing that comes up in the movie consistently is feeding people, especially kids.
Yeah, they had a breakfast program to feed kids.
That's a terrorist if I've ever heard of one.
And it was literally called like insurgent I don't know. The FBI called it some like super negative. No, gosh,
yeah,
okay.
No, and that's it's just it is infuriating. It's infuriating, and I can't imagine what so many people of color that watched this movie or lived through it or had family and have heard this stuff for their entire lives. Like, it's infuriating to my tiny brain. And I can't wrap my head around it. I can't, like, I just can't wrap my head around how
it's the people that can wrap their head around it that run into issues, let's say.
Probably, yeah.
And I think we're nearing with kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about, and it does talk to the larger issue at hand, maybe beyond the movie, but it is touched on in the movie, and it is that issue of violence. Strange side note, where was do you remember the first time you learned about the Black Panthers?
Yes, it was ironically or unironically would have been during the Rodney King stuff.
Okay.
So it came up because and I mentioned this on the show before, I think, or at least directly to you. My dad was a courier for a well-known and well appreciated whatever courier company.
In Burbank, this is Burbank Times.
Yeah, LA, yeah,
so
that
Hollywood,
area.
LA.
Yeah, so
circa.
So he was all over that area, Southern California for the most part, LA, Hollywood, all that stuff. And during the riots, and then shortly after, he ended up getting his hands on something he wasn't supposed to have, which was not supposed to be public, and it was a printout that was, I mean, it was a pretty chunky printout of what was being said by the police on their walkies and on their car radios and whatnot. And it was stuff that was being turned into the courts, but it hadn't been released to the public. And at some point during the discussion of Rodney King, the Black Panthers came up. And I didn't have a handle on exactly that what it was. It was, other than they were a group of, it was a quote unquote gang that was more organized than a gang. That was kind of the understanding I was given at the time.
That's a pretty good white explanation as far as
right. Yeah, no, I mean, that's as white as you can get, right? You know, they're a gang that's more organized. But the gang has a negative connotation, so right. It's immediately in my head. But at the time, it didn't, like, I didn't even have a negative connotation for, like, gangs had to have the word violence after it for me to have a negative connotation to it. And this is totally because I watched so many movies. I had so many friends that were either had new gang members or had a gang member brother or somebody that, and it was just like, it was just in life. It was just there, but they were just normal people. Like, it was, the bad gangs were okay. It was, you had the Bloods and the Crips. They were the bad guys, but only to each other. Like, I don't know. It was right. A weird thing. And it was so much of it was based off of hearsay, the few people that I knew, and then movies, like, even in movies about gangs, like about like colors, even, it's like there's just, I don't know. It was, I was jumbled as a kid, and I never but I never considered it like it wasn't bad inherently. You know, it was There were bad people, but it wasn't a bad thing.
I'm sure I grew up in a less, let's say, tolerant household than you did.
Surfers,
or more sheltered, I guess would be the polite way to put that.
All the surfing.
But The first time I learned about the Black Panthers was from Forrest Gump.
Sure. All right.
So also very appropriate, I feel like.
A very white explanation there too.
And well, I think I don't strictly remember their portrayal in the movie. I don't think it was terribly negative, but I remember the explanation I got, or maybe just because it's not like they weren't supposed to be feared. I don't think that's, in fact, Bill O'Neill, if he's any authority on the subject, it states how he understood it was something to kind of scare white people, because
sure, and that's also I think something that's floated around for years too.
Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, and again, this is all a bad way to say all of this, but I just remember it being maybe there being a little negative connotation to it, and just because of the violence involved. Like there was
sure
that attachment to it. However it was explained to me, or maybe I garnered from the film, I'm not sure. But there was this issue of they were violent. Like there was a violence thing about it.
Definitely. Yeah, no, that was I think at the forefront for a lot of people, for sure.
And the movie doesn't shy away from that. Like it again, maybe conflates a couple occurrences, but there are some shootouts, there's some murders, there are some Panthers that murder policemen, there are some policemen that murder Panthers. And one such instance is it Jake Winters, right?
The with the cop on the ground.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the most out and out execution that I think the Panthers certainly in this area did, but also that occurs in the movie. Oh, sorry. That the Panthers do to the police. It's not the worst out and out execution in the movie. That is Fred Winter's death.
That's Fred Hampton.
Fred Hampton. But with the Jake Winters stuff, they do touch a little bit more on that. Fred Hampton goes to his mother's home, and his mother says something along the lines of, "He did do this. This is part of what he has done,
right,
but it's not all he did."
Right. And I loved that. Actually.
It's great, and it's a great scene. I should have definitely looked up that actress's name and said it out loud in this podcast right now because she's on the cast list. So if I looked at it and then I did a page search for Winter, I might find it.
Alicia Joy Powell.
Alicia Joy Powell. That's who it would be. Does a fantastic job. But it's at that moment also that I think I realized, because when the movie started, and it did have that wonderful beginning, and it's kind of combined with some thoughts on protest and violence versus nonviolence. And I remember thinking, man, I already want everybody to see this movie because of what it's saying right now about this. Because I think one of the most misunderstood and annoyingly misunderstood stuff during all of this, Black Lives Matter, etc., are the people who are like, yeah, but do they need to interrupt traffic? Like all of, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before and could mention it again. But at that point in the movie, at the beginning, I'm like, man, everybody needs to see this. Everybody needs to understand this. And then at this moment where Fred Hampton is speaking with Jake Winter's mother, and she's saying all this stuff, and I'm like, you know what? This movie isn't for those people.
Oh, yeah, right. No, absolutely.
It's not the job of the people you already view as other to explain to you why there is no other. Like there's a great line at the beginning of the movie where Jesse Plemons' character, Roy Mitchell, says something like, you can't cheat or shoot your way to equality. And this is him talking about the Black Panthers in the same breath as the KKK and other organizations. Right,
which he does a number of times, which many people have completely erroneously.
But just that line, that's a line that some people would pick up on and be like, well, yeah, that's true. You can't shoot or cheat your way to equality, right? Not thinking that equality isn't, like, it's not a meritocratic system, or however you say that, meritocratic?
Meritocracy.
It's not a meritocracy. Yes, there we go.
We both know that word.
Equality just happens. Like, it just is, it's not a thing to be earned. So Jesse Plemons gets a lot of good lines as far as that goes, but it's in that moment, I think, with the conversation with Fred Winter's mother that kind of educated me in a way. It was like, dude, you still got some things to learn.
Yeah,
white boy.
I'm trying to remember where I first heard that. Somebody asked a question in like an earnest question, not being a not trying to be rude, but truly like trying to understand a thing. And the response was basically that, right? And it was from a person of color saying, it's not our job to break this stuff down for you. It's not our job for it. You know, you're asking this question to Black people, and it was aimed at Black culture. And it was like, I remember the answer being that it's not our job to explain this to you. It's your job to work to understand it. And asking some questions is acceptable, but certain things are, they're just things you don't ask. You know, it's like, it's part of life, and it is just a thing. We're not like people of color, other people of different race, gender, sexuality. They are not your personal Google search engine, you know, like
it's the racist going up to the person suffering racism and saying, well, prove to me why I shouldn't be racist. You know, it's the
right.
dumbest thing in the world. It's the stupidest thing you've ever heard of. Like anyway. Movie does a great job of standing on its own 2 feet, of being its own thing. And I would recommend it to everybody, anybody.
I agree. I think the performances here are top notch. The dialogue is great. You really get some really fantastic back and forths between the characters. And you know, I love me a movie that gives me something to think about, something to chew on, and
historical and cultural context.
Yeah,
got it all.
It does. It really, really does. This movie is 2 hours and 6 minutes, and it is well worth every moment of that timing. It earns it.
It's a 2 hour and 6 minute fun movie.
It's a nice time. At the end of it, you're gonna want to have a soda pop and an ice cream with your family.
And yeah, I would say if you're interested in the history, go look up those things I mentioned. The Slate article, I will send that out. The Murder of Fred Hampton documentary, also that episode, which I think I ended up finding straight up on YouTube, but it is actually the name of the actual TV series is Eyes on the Prize, and in the movie it's stated as Eyes on the Prize Part 2, I think, but it was hard to find. It's I think just listed as Eyes on the Prize, but it's episode 6 of season 2 is what it is. So I think that's what it is. It's season 2 of the series Eyes on the Prize. It's not called Eyes on the Prize 2. It's just the second season of it. So episode 6. And the first half is what you want. The next half is also amazing. The whole series is probably amazing, but the second half is just on the Attica riots. Also fascinating, but yes, those are the places to go to look up those things.
Oh, the places you'll go.
It's neat. And I would give this 5 stars.
Out of 3.
And if you liked Judas and the Black Messiah, you'll love the movie we do next week, which I don't know what it is. But
Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar.
Now that we've said we're not going to do that, are you trying to say we should just do that?
We could.
Fine with me.
All right, let's do it. We could go for something a little... You know, we've been on such a good roll of new movies lately. It's blowing my mind. And I just
don't want to stop?
I don't want it to end. I don't.
All right.
Let's check it out.
Hey, that's cool, because after the show, we get to talk about anything else we want. So, yes, come back next week. Podcast at bookclubformovies.com. Facebook and Twitter. Let us know what you think about Barb and Star or Judas and the Black Messiah together. Do a double feature.
It's going to be great. You're going to love it. Grab some nachos. Grab some sodas. It's going to be a family fun friend time.
It's going to be great. And now we do get to talk about anything else we've watched this week. Matt, do you want to mention anything else that you have seen?
I do. I've got a couple of films that I want to just... a couple that I'm going to briefly mention just for funsies.
Okay.
Decided I had not seen Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels for a while, it seems like, and had to rewatch that. That movie is just... like, I particularly like British crime films. I think they're real fun. That movie is just top to bottom... maybe the best Guy Ritchie movie. I
was gonna say, is that? I feel like I'm like, that's a Guy Ritchie movie, right? But then I'm like, wait, is that just?
It is.
Is it an actual Guy Ritchie movie, or is it just a GuyRitchie movie? You know, like
it's the original Guy Ritchie movie.
Okay,
it's his first one, and I still think it's his best. Snatch is a great follow up, but this movie hits it all the way through. The story, I think, is like Snatch is fun. I like Snatch a lot. I think Snatch is a case of him taking what he had already done, and then I'm gonna amp it up a little bit. And I think in the amping it up, something gets lost when you compare the two. Even though so many people cross over, there's so many similarities. Lock, Stock is such a tight, small movie that deals with so many characters and introduces them in such a fun way that you can see the DNA of this movie in everything he's subsequently done. It all came from this movie. And I still think the best thing he's ever done. It's so much better than the big budget stuff he does. It's much better than, he did King Arthur, for crying out loud. So at what point?
Dude, I didn't hate King Arthur.
I know you didn't, but it's no Lock, Stock.
It's, yeah. I don't know if I've seen Lock, Stock. If I have, I feel like that's the other thing that can happen with the Guy Ritchie movies is you can combine them in a lot of different ways and not remember which one you're thinking about.
I think the first couple of movies he did were like the quality level up there with the first few Christopher Guest movies. Like you know how it's like the same actors, you get a certain level of quality from all the actors, the story has a certain quality, and then there are a few movies here and there where they just kind of ebb and flow, and I feel like that's Guy Ritchie in particular also. Real similar.
Sure.
Another movie I watched this week, we had to in celebration, in the utmost joyous of celebrations for the most recent Mortal Kombat trailer, had to go back and watch 1995's Mortal Kombat, and that movie is still just so good. It's never not amazing. And every time I watch this movie, there's always one line that it takes me back to a specific moment in high school.
Just one? Oh, okay.
Because it's just for whatever reason, movies will just have a line that just hits you at the right time. And this isn't memorable in any way, except for my friends and I. There's a moment where, as they're all getting ready to get onto the boat, like Liu Kang has shown up at the dock. Johnny Cage has showed up, and he's got bags. He's carrying all this luggage. Jax is there. You can see all these guys milling about the docks. And as Liu Kang is walking past, Johnny Cage automatically, for whatever again, the reasoning here is ludicrous. The guy is dressed as if he's gonna be on this boat with everybody else. But for whatever reason, Johnny Cage is like, hey, when the boat gets here, go ahead and take my bags and bring them up to my room. And Liu Kang is like, wait, me? And he gives him the money, and he goes, you got it? And it's the way Liu Kang looks at him. He takes the money and he goes, I got it. And then he picks up the bags and just throws them in the water. Like, it's the, I got it.
Oh, it's the I got it? I thought it was going to be Johnny Cage's, glad I didn't ask him to park the car afterwards.
I didn't know. That is great, but it's the I got it. It's so funny. It's similar to my absolute 110% favorite part of The Fifth Element is the stick up that Bruce Willis, at like the very beginning when we first meet Bruce Willis, and the guy is like, give me the cash. And Bruce Willis takes the gun from him and he goes, I'll take that. And he goes, take it. I don't need it. It's just, and then
I never know what lines you're going to pick up on.
And he does the dance. It's so great. I love it. It's a little thing.
I sent you a video not too long ago, and usually I hate these because I get it's what the press junket or tour or whatever is now, is that it's a lot of stars or whatever going to what seem like smaller time news outlets or websites with people that I don't know. Maybe it's that they keep them in the interviews now. It just always seems like somebody. The problem is it probably seems like me if I had to do one of these where I'm like, hey, I like you and your things. What about this funny thing? We're friends. And then it just always seems so awkward and bad.
Yep.
And annoying. But there's one of these that a website did for, oh gosh, the freaking Johnny Cage's actor, the Lyndon. Okay.
No, his name is Lindsay.
Lyndon Ashby.
Lyndon Ashby. We were so close together.
And Robin Show is Liu Kang, yeah. But they do an interview with them where they make them play the Mortal Kombat arcade game first for a while. Yeah. Did you watch that when I said it? I did.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to say in that clip they talk about how that scene, this is what this is all about. This is why I even started this. That scene was Lyndon Ashby's idea, I think. He pitched it's either that scene or that idea. I think that he was going to give his bags to Liu Kang like he thought he was a ship employee. I think that was his idea. So
I got it.
That's who you like right now.
I love him.
That's who you're thinking.
They were both funny. We also watched a movie. So a friend of ours posted a thing on Facebook saying they watched this movie on Shudder called After Midnight. And he said, I very rarely watch a movie and at the end of it I can say I utterly hated it, but I hate this movie.
And so you're like, well, I gotta see this.
Beth and I were like, wow. So this is a movie. It is streaming on Shudder. This is something you can watch if you like.
Yeah, if you say so.
It is a monster movie. It's an indie film. It has nobody you've ever heard of in it. And I can...
Lyndon Ashby.
Lyndon Ashby. The movie revolves around a couple who now live in a small town. It's the town that they grew up in. They had moved away for a while. They moved back into their parents' house and their relationship. So the movie kind of goes back and forth in time where not literal, but it does a flashback to this is weeks ago or whatever. And you kind of have to, you piece it together. And at some point the girlfriend fiance leaves. And as soon as she leaves, this monster starts scratching at the door and starts trying to break in. And the husband, who's drunk now and is just falling apart, he shot a hole in the door. He's now the cops who he knows he's related to the sheriff. The sheriff is like, you gotta stop doing this, man. People are complaining now. You're chasing them down the road with your shotgun in their cars and all this stuff. And I'm going to spoil this movie because it's never going to be watched by anybody here.
Can you?
Yeah. So over half the movie is him sitting in front of this door in this room, in the hallway of the house, by himself, just he's puttering through the house, doing menial things, waiting for night so that he can sleep on this couch to stop the creature from breaking in the door. He tells all his friends who all know about this monster, and they're like, yeah, there's no monster. You're crazy. They come to his house. They can see there's a shotgun hole in the door on top of the fact that the door is seriously scratched to hell by something that is definitely not a bobcat, guys. I know, you're in Florida or something. It's not a bobcat. That's claws that are way worse. The girlfriend, fiance, shows back up. They decide they're going to have a dinner party because, why not? You haven't been falling apart at the seams this entire freaking movie, and now you're back together because I'm home. We get to this dinner party and he's kind of trying. He's like, no, I'm sorry. I love you. I've made mistakes. I'm wrong. They had a so stupid. They were this dinner party kicks off. Yeah, this dinner party kicks off and they've got a karaoke machine and everybody's doing singing, blah, blah, blah. And then they all finally kind of get together. They eat dinner. There's a little bit of a lull, and then he brings the karaoke machine in and he sings the entirety of the song Stay by Lisa Loeb to this entire room. And then the best scene in the movie, the monster dives across the screen and tackles him as soon as the song is over. And we get to see this practical effect monster that doesn't kill him. It just beats him up. It bites him a few times. They all end up going crazy and fighting the thing, and I think they shoot it and kill it.
You think?
I honestly don't remember. I remember because the movie was we were rolling our eyes so badly. I
still don't know if this ends with you saying, and it's the worst thing I've ever seen or not.
It's definitely not the worst thing I've ever seen, but it was bad. This is the effect, the makeup for the monster, kudos to the makeup job. It's a terrible makeup work though. The makeup looks like it's a bad design for the monster. It's stupid looking.
What's the name of the movie again?
After Midnight.
After Midnight.
I really recommend you guys find this movie and watch it.
gotta see this.
You mostly got to see it for the Lisa Loeb. It's only like an hour and 15 or hour and 20 minutes too. It's short.
Doesn't sound like it needs to be real long.
It didn't. I got two other movies here that I want to mention.
Okay.
One of which, actually both of which I kind of am interested in seeing if you're interested in watching.
Okay.
One of them is mid-90s.
Wait, so you have seen these already?
I did. I watched, yes. So
okay.
Mid-90s.
Interested in seeing if we do a show or if I'm going to watch it?
Well, if you're going to watch it.
Oh, okay. Mid-90s, yeah, I think that's been on my list for a little bit because it's...
So...
If I can't relate to that, it's the one it's a Jonah Hill's movie about growing up as a little skateboarder kid in the 90s, right?
Kind of. So that's what I thought it was. And that is kind of the movie, but this movie is a two-face in such a weird way. And
now I will probably watch it more then.
I really want to talk about it because it definitely doesn't do what I thought it was going to do.
I will 1,000,000% watch that movie.
The other movie is this movie came out like last year or 2 years ago with Evan Peters, who plays the Quicksilver of...
Oh, you told me about this,
of
right?
X-Men edition. American Animals. This movie is another movie that is based on a true story. It's based on a book theft that occurred at the real-life University of Transylvania, which exists, I think it's in Kentucky or Kansas, something like that.
Sure.
It's in one of those because it's a thing in the movie, like where they go to school matters, but I don't remember where it is because it only matters to where that particular library is. So the entire movie is based around these guys that decide we can make a couple $1 billion by stealing some hard to find books. And by hard to find, like they are the rarest of the rare kind of books. And one of them is still one of the most expensive books in the history of the world.
I'm sorry,
American Animals.
American Animals. It's a heist movie about what you're talking about.
It is, yes. And it's a true story. It took place in 2004. And the movie does some pretty interesting things. And one of the things that I actually really like about this is, and it was kind of fun to watch it like the day before Judas and the Black Messiah, is that it's another true story, significantly lower stakes in terms of the reality of the situation. But it still deals with interesting personalities. And one of the things I really enjoyed about the movie is that while it is a fictionalized telling with Evan Peters and all these other actors playing these characters, or playing these people, the real people are also in the movie doing these interviews in between, like they do like interstitials of the actual people that committed the crime. And then there's an amazing one at the very end, but there was a super fascinating thing with Evan Peters talking about how this movie, he really, really liked everything about this movie, what it was about, the story, the people, but he was so frustrated with the director because the actors were on stage or on site with the actual criminals and they were not allowed to talk to them because they didn't want to somehow get a glossed over or having the real life people tell the actors something either in confidence or about the thing and give them a different perspective on who the people were than when they were written about. So like they didn't want them to try to make themselves out to be better or worse than they actually were. And and I thought that was interesting, and it brought me to the movie. It is streaming on Amazon. Really, I thought it was a super interesting story. The movie overall is pretty good. It's not going to blow your socks off or anything. Evan Peters is, I think that guy is he can be a very good actor.
He's cool.
I like him a lot. And
that's some real Patrick Fugit energy in my eyes.
Yes, actually. I think those two, at one point in my life may have wanted to get them confused, but then it was, oh, you're American Horror Story. You're music guy from Music Movie. So, and also Wrist Cutter's a Love Story, which is Patrick Fugit's best work. It's not. It's
not
like,
a fan of.
no, Almost Famous is definitely his best.
Okay.
Wrist Cutters. I love Wrist Cutters. Is great. It's a great movie.
No, they're great.
But yeah, American Animals, totally worth a watch.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't have.
You don't have 25 movies like me?
I have half a movie that I was going to mention if you mentioned the movie that you watched that got me to watch it in a way. But since you haven't, maybe I'll wait and see if it comes up next week, and then I can talk about it when I've actually finished the movie.
Well, now what movie is it so I know?
Mysterious. Interesting.
Now I've got to look at my text messages to you. What have I talked to you about? No,
I don't know if you'd be able to guess it. I will say it did come along the lines of the Mortal Kombat stuff where we did our...
Woo Assassins?
No. That is something different that I did also find, but related. Yes, that's how I found that as well.
The Kid Detective.
Okay, fine. I'll just tell you because the story about how we got there is funny in its circularity. I was telling you, or no, wait. Okay, now I have to remember where it started.
Does this have to do
You
with...
sent me the new Mortal Kombat trailer.
Yes.
Which, check it out. Pretty good.
Wait,
I have high hopes for that movie.
I really can't wait. It doesn't matter. It's going to be better than Annihilation. So
it's going to be better than Annihilation. I then said, "Oh, that's weird. I just watched the Joe Taslim episode of Art of Action, which is Scott Adkins' thing."
Which, okay, now I know.
And then you were like, "Oh." I wasn't there for your thought process after that, but then you were like, well, now I have to watch The Raid.
No, that is 200%. I looked up the name because I was like, why do I know the name?
He's the other good cop. I forget if he's the brother or what, but he's
not
the
the
other
brother.
good cop.
He's the other good cop.
He's not Iko Uwais, but he's the other good cop in The Raid.
Yeah.
Redemption. And then after watching that, you sent me a text that was like, hey, the good cop from Raid Redemption is Sub-Zero in Mortal Kombat. And I was like, yeah, that's how this all started.
And that is how I got to The Raid also.
Yeah. So I guess that's where I was going. I finally put on Marantau, which is Gareth Evans, the director of The Raid.
Oh.
It's his first movie and Iko Uwais' breakout. Like I guess Gareth Evans discovered Iko.
Yeah.
And I had never seen that, so I was in the middle. I'm halfway through that, and have some words, some very interesting words. So I don't know. I would almost, I wouldn't say do a show because I'm only halfway through it, but
I'm ready to do a show.
It's interesting in terms. If you were going to talk about The Raid, it would be. I had some.
Some
responses.
I just forgot to write it down. That movie is so cool.
No. We've certainly done enough this show. Let's save it for next week.
Well, because next week, then, if I do that, when we talk about The Raid, I'm definitely going to watch Dread because it's been sitting there. I keep eyeballing it and thinking,
that's fine. I will take that deal.
Watch it.
It's perfectly fine, and that'll give me a chance to finish Marantau. So, if you want to come back next week for not only Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar, are we pulling
Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar?
We are going to talk about Marantau, The Raid, and quite possibly Dread. So that'll be next week on Book Club for Movies. Thank you anybody that hangs out at any point ever or emails us at podcast@bookclubformovies.com and Facebook or Twitter. You're cool.
You are.
And I hope to meet you someday.
And remember, I am the law.
Neat.